All right, I think I got this figured out now. Okay, so there is the First Amendment. The exact words: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That's where we get the Establishment Clause. Oh, sorry, and the Free Exercise Clause. Good, it's on their screen. Good. There we go. That is where the First Amendment comes from. All right, this one will make more sense because it has more. All right, so there is the separation, and the Establishment Clause sets up the separation, the wall between church and state. Okay, so as you can see, there is supposed to be a separation. Church and state should not be allowed. That means there should be no church in government, right? There should be no church in schools. There should be no church at the courthouse. There should be no church in the laws that we're passing. However, all of us know that there are various ways where there is religion involved in our government. For example, on the right of your screen up there behind the wall, you can see the government supports churches and religion in a variety of ways, such as a tax exemption. They have chaplains in Congress and the military, and God is on all of our coins, on all of our money. In God we trust is on our coins. So, and in the pledge, right? One nation under God is in the Pledge of Allegiance. When you take the oath of office, you swear to God that you will follow the rules of the country or whatever, right? Of the Constitution. So God is all intertwined in government and school business. So deciding exactly how intertwined they can be is what this separation of church and state is all about. Okay. Before we go any further, I have some vocabulary words that you need to be aware of. These may not all be listed on your note sheet, so you might want to add these 5 or six different words. The first word is chaplain. That's come up in this class before, but a chaplain is somebody who leads others in prayers or spiritual guidance, such as in the military, in government groups, etc. I have a case about a chaplain here in a little bit. Perhaps you've heard of Charlie Chaplin before, unrelated. But a chaplain in general, like military branches have chaplains. Like if you want to talk to somebody about counseling and problems or whatever, and they give you some spiritual guidance, you can go and visit the chaplain. Sometimes like a city council might have a chaplain to start the meeting with the prayer, things like that. The second word is parochial, is how that word is said. It's parochial. Parochial means church-related or church-sponsored. So parochial is church-related or church-sponsored. Mostly in Nebraska, we hear of it as parochial schools, like Grand Island Central Catholic, Kearney Catholic, Heartland Lutheran. Those are parochial schools, not public church-sponsored schools. Okay. The opposite of parochial is kind of secular. The word secular. Secular means not church-related. Okay. Secular, not church-related or worldly. I use that in a sentence. American culture has become more secular over time. Fewer and fewer people go to church, and the culture is more secular, meaning less centered around religion than before. The opposite of religious is secular. The fourth word is evolution. Most of you know what evolution is. That's that theory of by Charles Darwin, that had higher level animals descending from lower level animals. Basically, it's a theory that humans came from monkeys, right? And monkeys came from other creatures, and other creatures crawled out of a swamp as little lizardy things or whatever, right? And we all started with the Big Bang, and then little by little, life forms have evolved, okay? So evolution is something you have to understand for later in this chapter, as is creationism. Creationism is the opposite of evolution. Creationism is the religious belief that God created everything. God created the world, God created people, and he created people distinctly from animals. Okay? Those are two conflicting viewpoints. Evolution, well, generally conflicting viewpoints. Evolution is that humans came from monkeys. Creationism, God made humans special. So you need to know the differences between those. And then voucher. You need to know what a voucher is. Maybe you've heard of a voucher before. Voucher is like a coupon. It's a method of payment in place of money. It could be like a ticket, a free ticket for something, or a coupon for something, or a scholarship for something. Okay. I wrote the example up there. Recently, I was on an airplane trip and my flight got delayed for like 8 hours. So they gave all the passengers on that flight vouchers to go eat at Burger King or whatever restaurant was in the airport we were at. We all got vouchers. So you got this little coupon and you went and you ate for free. That was a voucher. Sometimes you get travel vouchers like for a free airline ticket or something like that. So, but vouchers are free, like, or payments used in exchange for payment. Okay. Then your book next goes into a whole bunch of different cases. So if you look on the slides or up on the screen if you're in class, in parentheses and italics, I tried to link the cases with the outcomes. So if you're looking at your chart of cases, you should. I think I found all of them and got them into the slideshow. You should be able to update your summary notes on question number 3 with all of these cases. So what has the court ruled on the establishment side of freedom of religion? Okay. How intertwined can government be with religion? All right. Well, one of the first religion cases that they had was Pierce versus Society of Sisters. Basically, the state of Oregon tried to outlaw parochial schools. The state of Oregon required that all kids go to public school, and that law was ruled unconstitutional. So the first thing is you can't require kids to go to public school. Kids should be able to choose, and that's clear back from the 1920s. Some states you'll find in these cases are trying to make religion more involved in schools, and some states, like Oregon, was trying to completely get religion out of schools. So, but in Pierce versus Society of Sisters, the Society of Sisters won, and Oregon could not, and no state can require kids to go to public schools. Okay. The next batch of cases had to deal with release time. Release time, I always try to remind kids, think of like CCD or like confirmation classes or things that you go maybe on Wednesday night or something like that, right? Release time, though, would be, can you let a kid out of school, like seventh period or first period before school starts? Can you excuse a kid from school to go to religion classes? That's what kind of release time is. Well, some schools were holding these classes in their school building, like in the public school. So they were allowing kids to get out at a certain time and go learn about God in another classroom in a public school. Those were unconstitutional. However, you can be released during school hours as long as you leave the school building and go to another facility. So if schools want to let kids out early for religious reasons, or I think this would tie into our Wednesday night rule, how that you can't have a sports practice or an activity practice after 6 o'clock on Wednesday night, you can have technically like a church night as long as they're leaving the school to do it if it's release time. Now, release, again, is only when they're during class, but it's kind of tied into that, right? You can always, well, I'll come back to what you can do in the school here in a little bit, right? So release time is okay as long as you leave the school. Prayers in the Bible, the purple one. Various cases. In Engel versus Vitale, that showed that states cannot have their own prayer. New York had their own state prayer that every student said at the beginning of the day. It would come over the loudspeaker just like we do the morning Pledge of Allegiance. They would start the day with the New York school prayer. God, please help us learn better today. Amen, or something like that. Unconstitutional. You cannot start a school day with a prayer. You cannot start the school day with a moment of silence and prayer. That was Wallace versus Jaffrey and Abington versus Shemp. Slightly different cases, but the same outcome. They wanted to start the day. Students, now we will have a moment of silence and prayer. You cannot add and prayer if you are going to have a moment of silence in a public school. Okay? So you can occasionally have a moment of silence, like if someone died in your community and you wanted to have a moment of silence, technically that would constitutionally be okay. But you cannot add moment of silence and prayer or encourage prayer in any way in a school. Okay? The next one, Santa Fe versus Doe. Schools cannot lead a prayer before sporting events. You cannot have team members. You cannot have Bible clubs in your school leading a prayer. You cannot lead the public in a prayer. Okay, so the speaker, like the guy, like I announce at basketball games, I cannot start. Before we start, I'd like to lead you all in a little prayer. Being a public school, and I'm a public school employee, and if you're a public school student or a cheerleader or whatever, you cannot lead the crowd in a prayer. You cannot have prayer as a part of your graduation ceremony. Lee versus Wiseman. Many of you are getting close to that point of graduation. Can you start graduation with the prayer? Well, no, constitutionally, that is not allowed. The school cannot, as part of the ceremony, have a person coming in to lead the crowd in prayer. If a high school student who has the microphone, say as class president, who's giving a speech anyway, if that person were to just impromptu say, please bow your heads and I'll lead you in prayer, that's technically constitutionally okay. Like the school will not get in trouble if the kid who has the microphone stops his speech or starts his speech with a little prayer. That's on him. It was not in the school. It was not on the program. It was not officially endorsed by the school. If a kid does that on his own, the school won't get in trouble for that. So you may have been to a graduation where they have a prayer before. It's because the school did not clearly put it in their program or endorse it. Or no one has complained. That's the other thing about all of these is pretty much everything's okay until someone sues you. But what you should know by these precedents is that if you do some of these things, or if our school does some of these things knowingly and someone sues, we're going to lose. And we'll probably have to pay money for it. I would say that is kind of the same thing, but until somebody complains, it's probably okay.
I think though that it's kind of, I think the school will get away with it because it's a person who's done it the last couple of years just kind of goes up there and starts it. And I don't think that it's a person who's not employed by the school district.
I think that's what you have to be a little careful of. It's not part of the program officially, but yes, I do think it's the same concept. Yep. Good question. 10 Commandments. You cannot require the posting of the 10 Commandments in every classroom. Some states were doing that. Stone versus Graham. The 10 Commandments, and we'll get more on that in a second, but you cannot, as a state law, require that. Okay. What can you do then, though? The last sentence on the purple prayers in the Bible. Students are allowed to pray in school, and the Bible can be used as a historical context or as a literature resource. So can you study the Bible in English class? Yeah, you can. Can you study it in history class? Sure, because it tells the story of the Jews in there, and Jews are world history. So you absolutely can. And there's a lot of literature and literary things that you can learn in English class. So the Bible can be used in school. And kids can pray anytime they want in school. You can pray in pretty much any method, anytime in school. I mean, obviously there's the distraction and it could hurt your grade or whatever if you're praying instead of learning, but the school cannot keep kids from praying in school. That is your right as free exercise of religion. But the school cannot lead it and they cannot push it upon you. That's the general thing. Can team members pray before the football or volleyball game? Sure, absolutely. Can the coach be in there leading them? No, unless not really. They can't. If an athlete wanted to complain and say that coach is leading us in prayer, the coach would lose. Okay, that's the way it would happen. So if students lead themselves in prayer and it is optional to participate or not, great. Nothing wrong with that. Okay. Students' religious groups. So what about having a Bible club in school? Can the Bible club meet in school and use like a classroom to sing Bible songs and memorize Bible verses? Yes, that is the West Side Community Schools versus Mergen's case. A lot of you couldn't find that because it wasn't right in your book. They talked about the case, but they didn't cite the source for it. West Side, that's Omaha. That's a case from Omaha. In fact, a couple of these cases in here are Omaha. That's Omaha West Side, home of Nancy Harrington. They wanted to have a Bible club after school, and the school said, no, sorry, we can't bring religion in. That's establishment clause. There's got to be a separation between church and state. And it turned out that the kids can have the religious club in school as long as it's after school hours and as long as you follow the same rules as you would like with FFA or FBLA, right? If they can use the school after school for club meetings, sure. If you allow the Girl Scouts to come in and use the gym, you can allow Bible groups to do the same thing, okay? So religious groups can absolutely use school facilities. They can use school classrooms. They can have school children as long as it's after school hours and they follow the same rules as every other club. Evolution is the next one. Basically, this is kind of the opposite. The schools, particularly in the South, again, I think Arkansas, yep, Epperson versus Arkansas was one case. It started with a case in Tennessee. In general, that's the Bible Belt. Again, not judging, just saying. Those schools, there were many states that tried to pass state laws that required the teaching of creationism, that God created everything. That was the state law said you had to teach creationism. Then, if they taught evolution, some states would say if you teach evolution, you have to teach creationism. Okay? Those laws have pretty much all been unconstitutional. Evolution, the general shorthand rule is evolution is what should be taught in public schools, period. Okay? Evolution should be taught in public schools. Creationism should not be taught in public schools. That's the shorthand bottom line. Before I go on, I want to point out that every single thing I'm talking about only talks about public schools, right? Public schools are taxpayer funded. Citizens pay taxes. They have no choice. They have to pay taxes, property taxes or whatever. That tax money goes to form these public schools. So these are government extensions. So public schools are the ones that all of these release time prayers, etc., relate to. If you go to a private school, particularly a parochial school, none of this applies. So if you're thinking, why can Nebraska Christian or why can Central Catholic go to the middle of the court and pray after every game if they want to? They're a Catholic school. They can do whatever they want as far as religion goes, right? Totally different. They are not getting taxpayer money, and that's what we're going to go into next. They are not getting tax dollars to do those things, so they can pray all they want. Okay. So what about then talking about parochial schools? What is the connection that we can have? Well, we use something called the Lemon test to deal with religious schools and the entanglement with government. All right. So I highlighted this one. When mixing church and public schools, always add lemon and use the Lemon test. Lemon is in italics because Lemon is based on the case Lemon versus Kurtzman. It's a court case. The person's name was Lemon. That's where we get the Lemon test. It has nothing to do with the fruit lemons. I just put that on there to help you remember it. Okay, it has to do with a person who basically there was a parochial school that was using taxpayer money to pay for books and teacher salaries and school supplies. And the Supreme Court came in and said, no, you cannot. The state was allowing it. The state allowed taxpayer money to go towards private parochial schools. And the state came in and said, no, you cannot. There are three things that it has to pass in order for it to be okay. So the Lemon test is a three-pronged or three-step procedure that they look at on any church and state separation issue when it comes to private schools getting public money. Can Grand Island Central Catholic, Kearney Catholic get public money for anything? Well, one, if the money going to them is for non-religious purposes. Two, if it is not advancing nor inhibiting, stopping religion. And three, if it's not excessively entangling the government. And number three is really the kicker, okay? The government cannot be forced to be there all the time checking to make sure that it's not being too entangled. All right, and that's all. We'll go through examples here in just a second so you can see. Sure. All of them swoop in from a place unknown. Okay. What is allowed then according to the Lemon test? According to Everson versus Board of Education, busing students using public buses to go to parochial schools, constitutional. Okay? It is okay for they use that as a safety issue. So it is okay to go in and bus kids to any school you want. Paying for textbooks. If a state wants to allow public funds to go to textbooks for all kids, no matter what school they go to, fine. Because textbooks could easily be, we are going to pay for science books to all our schools in the state of Nebraska. Fine. Okay, because we can check one textbook and say, nope, they are not religious. Sounds good. Paying to administer standardized tests. If you as a state want to require all schools to take the ACT, and you want to pay for a person to go to a Catholic school, for example, and give out that test, that is fine. That is not excessive entanglement. That is not a violation of the Lemon Test. You can provide interpreters for deaf students, and you can even allow vouchers. That was a controversial one almost 20 years ago now in Ohio, Zellman versus Simmons-Harris. Ohio passed a state law that said we are going to give like little scholarships to students, particularly from inner cities, and they can use those scholarships to go to any school they want. They can go to any private school they want. Well, most private schools, like Nebraska in Ohio, most private schools are religious schools. Okay, there are some other schools that aren't religious in other states. They have different charter schools and things that sometimes have tuition or whatever. But most of the kids that got vouchers, like 90% of them, went to a church school. So people sued saying, basically, you're giving kids money to go to church. And that money is taxpayer money. That's what a voucher or a school choice voucher program will do. So this is something worth watching because there are programs like that on the books in Nebraska or on the desk of the state legislators in Nebraska talking about school choice. What do you do with these inner city Omaha kids? Their school isn't doing them any good and they're failing their subjects. They should be able to go to a private school, but they can't afford it. So what do you do for these inner city kids? They should be able to get government taxpayer scholarships and go wherever they want. That's the argument pro voucher people. Okay, the other side is like, well, that's basically just paying them to go to church. There's no separation of religion there. And since Nebraska only has religious, really private schools, they really don't have other options. They have to pretty much end up going to a church school. So that's something to watch out for and see how that goes. All right, things that have been overturned and not allowed. You cannot pay for field trips with public money, and you cannot pay for teacher salaries of any kind. There is the Grand Rapids, Michigan School District versus Ball. Some of you couldn't find that case as well. That's pretty much it. Teacher salaries, no matter what subjects they teach, are not allowed to be paid for by public funds. Okay? Taxpayers cannot pay a salary for any teacher who works at a private school, a church-sponsored school. That is a violation of the entanglement part of the Lemon Test. Okay? You can check textbooks without getting entangled, but for the government to come and check to make sure that teacher is only teaching science and not teaching religion, that is too tough. It would require the government to get too ingrained in the system, and the government cannot get entangled. That is the Lemon Test. All right, just a few more slides. I think 2 more. What about some other things relating to the Establishment Clause? What about seasonal displays? We're talking about Christmas, Easter displays. Can a courthouse, can a public school, can a city park, all of those public areas, can they put up religious decorations? That's the question, okay? The first one, Lynch versus Donnelly, was a nativity scene. Some people don't know what a nativity scene is. Do any of you know? Yeah, the baby Jesus, Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, the wise men, all that, right? That is a nativity scene with the manger, okay? Well, the city wanted to, whatever state that was in, Lynch versus Donnelly, the city put up a nativity scene in the public park. And the Supreme Court ended up ruling that that was okay because it had other non-religious objects as well. It also had like Santa and a sleigh and reindeer and candy canes. So as long as the display had secular objects, candy cane, Santa, and the religious objects, nativity, it was kind of an overall celebration. It was okay. If they throw in some Jewish things as well, the menorah or whatever, Star of David. You throw in some decorations from other religions, you put it with secular stuff. It can be on a city park, it can be in a courthouse, etc. All right? Probably constitutional. The second case, County of Allegheny versus the ACLU, however, all that was the courthouse had a big banner that said, "Glory to God in the highest." Right before, I think it was Easter. Yeah, it could have been Christmas or Easter, I don't remember. "Glory to God in the highest" was the only banner. And that one was unconstitutional because it was strictly Christian, one banner, no other displays allowed. Okay? So it's not okay if it's only Christian or only a particular religion, because that seems to be going after just one thing. And then Pittsburgh versus ACLU, that one was okay again because it had Jewish and Christian and multiple religions all in the same display. As long as you have multiple religions and mixed with secular things, you're fine on displays. That's the general rule the court has set. Okay? The other column is about chaplains. This would go with question number 5 on the back of your notes sheet on the back of the first page there, question number 5. The Supreme Court ruled in Marsh versus Chambers 1983 that it is permissible for chaplains to open sessions of Congress and state legislatures with a prayer. This case, Marsh versus Chambers, is actually talking about Ernie Chambers, who is the Nebraska state senator from Omaha, one of the state senators from Omaha. He sued because he didn't think public money should be going to allowing a chaplain to lead Congress, the state unicameral, in a prayer every day. And the court ruled that it was okay to have chaplains in government because they are not the same as children. Adults in a setting such as Congress can make up their own mind. If they don't want to pray, they just won't. They'll sit at their desk and keep working. Whereas kids, if we start a school day with the prayer, students are going to feel more pressured to participate. So prayer in school, not okay when it's organized and led by the school. Prayer, okay in adult settings such as Congress, city council, etc., to be started with a prayer. Those are okay because they are adults and they can make up their own minds whether they want to participate or not. Okay? So that's kind of what we're getting at there. Students and adults are not treated the same in that situation. Oh, sorry. 10 Commandments. What about the 10 Commandments? The 10 Commandments goes the same as seasonal displays. Okay? The 10 Commandments can be seen 2 different ways. They can be seen as like a history monument because they are Jewish laws. So government places could want a copy of the 10 Commandments alongside various other things like the Bill of Rights or the Constitution or something like that, right? Because they're all laws. However, if the meaning of the 10 Commandments is seen as only religious, then they're not okay. All right? In the first one, Van Orden versus Perry, it is okay to have statues of the 10 Commandments on public property, such as the courthouse. In this case, it was the state capitol building. This was Mariah's case, by the way. She presented to you guys. It is okay to have the monument as long as there are other monuments as well. It is not okay to be by itself in a city park or something if there are no other monuments with it. Okay, so if St. Paul, for example, wanted to put it at the courthouse along with their tributes to the fallen veterans, probably fine. Because there's like all those monuments across from Hometown Market there, right on the courthouse lawn. You got the World War II veterans or whatever, right? You got the monuments there. If you also had some other monuments there, you could probably put in the 10 Commandments if you wanted, and it would probably be past the test. But if there were no other, if it was just in the city park, for example, right by the swings, and you just had, boom, 10 Commandments. Follow these, children. Probably would be unconstitutional. Okay, there was a case I think in Nebraska. It was like Nebraska City or Falls City, one of those down in that corner, where they had to take the 10 Commandments out of their park because there was no other monument along with it. So that's the general rule there. Last slide. Last part then is the free exercise. The second half, all of those have been establishments so far. This last one is about the free exercise. What right do you have to practice your own religion? All right. The things on the left are the limits to free exercise. The things on the right are things that you can do. Things on the left are things that you aren't necessarily allowed to do. Those are religious activities not protected. The things on the right are things that are protected. Okay, so these are all court cases. These are all based on court cases throughout the years of our Constitution. The first one, polygamy. But my religion says I can have many wives. Well, the government and the Supreme Court said that you can't. So polygamy in 1800s was practiced by Mormons, and they back in the day sued to say that they should be able to. State law said that they couldn't. They sued to say that they could, and the court ruled in favor of the state, saying no, you cannot allow polygamy. Does not have to be allowed as a even if you have a religious reason for it. There was a church, I believe, in Florida that was using poisonous snakes as part of their religious ceremonies. They were kind of like worshiping them and doing like rituals with poisonous snakes. And that was deemed to be the danger of the children that were in the audience at that religious ceremony was triumphant over the religious freedom side of it. So you are not allowed to use, or you're not constitutionally allowed to use poisonous snakes. Some religions don't want to get kids vaccinated. Schools can require vaccinated kids, so you do not have a religious exemption to vaccination. People have tried to get out of the military or the draft due to religious reasons, and they were not allowed to get out of that, and they were not allowed to avoid paying Social Security. What they were allowed to do, Amish kids are allowed to drop out of school on a religious exemption after grade 8, where most kids have to go till they're 16. Jehovah's Witnesses cannot be forced to salute a flag. You can't make people stand up and salute the flag. States can require businesses to be closed on Sundays, and you can require religious groups to have a parade. Before they have a parade, you can require religious groups to hold a parade as well. That actually probably should have been on the limit side now that I look at it. But those are all things that Supreme Court cases have ruled to be constitutional or unconstitutional based on the free exercise.